Once again I pour out my heart, for I know that you hear every cry. You are listening, no matter what state my heart is in. You are faithful to answer with words that are true and hope that is real. As I feel your touch, you bring a freedom to all that's within. In the safety of this place, in the safety of this place, I'm longing to pour out my heart, to say that I love you. Pour out my heart, to say that I need you. Pour out my heart, to say that I'm thankful. Pour out my heart, to say that you're wonderful. We're going to talk about King Josiah. His story starts in 2 King chapter 22. He was a well-known king of Judah. It said in verse 2 that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and walked in all the ways of David his father, and he did not turn aside to the right or to the left. That's just the start of Josiah. What's very special about him is that there's a story that talks about how when he found the book of the law, when he realized how the people of Israel were not following God's law, what he says in verse 13 is to the priest, he said, "Go inquire of the Lord for me and for the people and for all Judah concerning the words of this book that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that is kindled against us, because our fathers have not obeyed the words of this book, to do according to all that is written concerning us." Josiah realized that God's wrath is coming, and he was already asking priests to pray on behalf of all the people of Judah, because God's wrath is coming. And if you read 2 Kings, you come to realize and understand that this wrath was caused by a previous king of Judah, Manasseh. And he was evil, and he did not do what was right in the sight of God. And that caused God to be so angry that God is going to exile his people. And that wrath is being carried over, and King Josiah comes into his throne, and he comes to realize that God's people is so wicked. They're gonna for sure get God's wrath and for sure suffer and get all these consequences. And what's crazy is that Josiah, knowing all of this, he still pursues the Lord. He still doesn't follow bad kings of the past. He is one of the good kings of Judah. He reinstated a covenant, or he made a covenant in chapter 23, verse 3. It says, "And the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord, to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart and all his soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book." And all the people joined in the covenant. Josiah longed for God, even knowing the wrath that is about to come because of the unfaithfulness of God's people. He is a good king, not just because of the things that he is going to do, because if you continue reading chapter 23, it lists all the great things that Josiah did. He tore down idol worship. He did all these things opposite of what bad kings would do. He was setting an example to what it looks like to follow God. And for him, when I'm reading this, I feel like he has every reason to ask God, God, where are you? I'm doing all these great things for you. I'm reinstating Passover, the celebration of the Passover. And I've done all the things that you wanted me to do. I followed your laws. But even then, in chapter 23, what's crazy, after doing all these good things, God says this. Verse 26, still, the Lord did not turn from the burning of his great wrath, by which his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. And the Lord said, I will remove Judah also out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and I will cast off the city that I have chosen, Jerusalem, and the house of which I said, my name shall be there. It doesn't make sense. God, I followed your laws. I've done this, I've done that. I've calculated, I've tallied every good thing that I've done for you, God. But still, your wrath is still coming. It doesn't make sense. But I urge you to think from a different perspective. I don't think Josiah did all these great deeds, everything that he did, just so that God could remove his wrath. I think first he understood who God was. He understood the consequences of not following him. He understood God's wrath. And for him, he still chose to worship, not because to eliminate God or change God's mind, but because of who God is. First, understanding who God is and choosing to worship him, choosing to follow him, just like the covenant that he made, to keep his words, to keep his commands with all your heart. He's not counting every good deed that he's doing. But more so, he's just fixating on who God is and choosing to worship him regardless of circumstances. Because you can see in chapter 23, the circumstances do not look good. And so I urge you to think from a different vantage point. Don't count all the good things that you've done, like feeding the homeless, like tithing, like going to church every Sunday. Whatever you may think, I urge you not to think of your relationship with God as keeping tallies, but more so as a personal relationship to praise the God who saves you, to praise the God who loves you even before you ever loved him.
Poured out my heart to say that I love you. Pour out my heart to say that I need you. Pour out my heart to say that I'm thankful. Pour out my heart to say that you're wonderful. Pour out my heart to say that I love you. Pour out my heart to say that I need you. Pour out my heart to say that I'm thankful. Pour out my heart to say that you're wonderful. You're wonderful, You're wonderful. You're wonderful.